Hello! Today we are here to discuss Charioteer.
That's right.
And this is from GMT Games. And
You're stealing my thunder.
No, I'm stealing the chariot.
Yeah, that's part of what I'm supposed to do.
All right, fine.
No, go ahead.
No, we're not going to talk about it now. All right. Different game. No. Before we get into it, though, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell down there so you can follow along on all of our exploits, hijinks, and mispronunciations.
That's right.
So, Rob, what can you tell us about Charioteer?
So, Charioteer by GMT Games.
Really?
Yeah, I know, right? What a surprise. This is a brand new release, 2022. Overall rank is 8,071 on Board Game Geek. It's rated at 7.6. It plays 2 to 6, which is kind of nice. We don't get to play a lot of those very often. And it can be played in 1 to 2 hours. Designer is Matt Calkins. Artist is Donald Haggerty. Published by GMT. Now, the MSRP is $85, which seems a little pricey, but most places are not selling it that. Miniature Market's got it at, that's the cheapest retail at $59.99. Noble Knights at $69.95. Geek Market had a couple at $58.
Yeah.
So
for that price, what you're getting, which is surprising to me for a GMT game, is typically I associate GMT with the chits and the war games. This one actually has wooden components, which is, to me, this is their version of a deluxified game. It did have stickers though, so just
one piece had a sticker.
I think maybe that's what deluxified actually means in English. Stickered. Yeah. This one has much nicer tokens than what you typically see in a GMT game. They're painted on the top. Some of it's not great painting. There's some lines on the side.
But there's a lot of them.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. You get some wooden cylinders and basic wooden cubes. Which are say they're black in the book, but they're actually blue.
He's colorblind. I didn't look at that.
So maybe I didn't say it. They just showed a picture that was black on them. You get cards that have no limb finish,
but I'm okay with it because they're really
good thickness.
They're good thickness, so I'm okay with it. Yeah, it's a good quality card.
They have some iconography on them. It's pretty simple to interpret, which I like. There's no cheat sheets, but the iconography is on the player board, but there's no definition. It just shows the icon and tells you the name of it.
And really, once you get it down, it's enough.
Yeah, it's not complex. No. I mean, once you read through the rules, we'll get to the rules here in a little bit. But as far as the component quality, you get this oversized board.
It's huge.
It's huge. It barely fits on our table, but it's 2 pieces and they slide together. Yeah. They move around a lot when you're playing the game.
But it's still pretty nice looking. I like the board a lot. It's very cool.
As far as the functionality of it, I didn't like the shifting, but it really didn't impact the game that much because you're basically got huge spaces you're moving on. It might make more of a difference if you played with 6 players. I don't know if you play with 4, but it didn't really impact us too much. If you had played with 6 players, you're going to need a bigger table or a long table.
Yeah, Board Game Geek did say the sweet spot is 4 to 5.
Okay. So, yeah, we were right in that sweet spot then. You get these player boards that are really more like cardstock. They're not thick at all.
They're not thick at all, but they're functional.
Yeah, they work. I mean, it's been nice to have.
They organize stuff, but
all in all, I don't think there's anything super outstanding about this. I'll probably give it a 6.5. I think's where I'm at.
I think I'm a little bit higher. I'm going to go 7 because I like how much of the wooden components you get. So
you do get a lot of wood,
and you get a lot of chariots wood and the chariots, and I really like the board a lot, like I said. So I'm going to give it a 7.
Okay. So now moving on to theme. So this is a kind of a Roman gladiator.
The circus. It's the Circus Maximus.
Circus Maximus.
So you're doing a race during Circus Maximus.
Yeah, race for glory in ancient Rome. It says specifically. So yes, you're racing chariots around the Circus Maximus. You're playing cards that don't really give you any kind of feel for a Roman feel on them. They have just the icons on them.
Yeah.
I didn't get a strong Roman feel from this game apart from the chariots and this obviously the stadium here. It didn't really strike me as it struck me. I mean, I could have just as easily seen these be race cars. I mean, the stands, matter of fact, I was thinking, it looks like those people are way too colorful for ancient Romans.
They had different color togas. Yeah, they weren't all white.
But I wouldn't expect to see, I'd see a lot more white in the stands, I would think, than I would see all these colors.
Really? Were you there?
I probably was. So yeah, I'm guessing that this is a little overdone. I mean, it almost looks like what you see in the stands, like an Indy 500 or something. Or you could have made this the pod races from Star Wars if you got the
Well,
IP
the color's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I didn't see anything that stood out to me as this felt like ancient Rome. I mean, especially when if you take the board out of the picture or replace these with any other kind of icon, you do have a laurel and you've got a column on the player boards. That's about the extent of it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's a subtle theme.
Yeah.
It's not very strong at all, but it's not bad either. It's just very light.
Yeah, I mean, you do have an Emperor die that you roll that is basically an event die that happens each round. But yeah, it's pretty much layered on. You could have this be any kind of race, I think. I don't see anything that would make this feel Roman.
Other than the board. The board is the most thematic part of it, in my opinion.
But even that is just brown.
Yeah, but you got these statues down here that look kind of cool and down on each end. And
yeah, I mean,
it's okay.
There's nothing wrong with the art. I mean,
okay.
It's just, it doesn't strike me as real Roman. So, when I'm thinking about the fact that I like Roman-themed games, this one would not strike me as a Roman-themed game other than the fact that it's called that,
I get it.
So, thematically, I'm probably at 6.5 again, I think. I mean, it's just mainly because I think the art's attractive and the iconography is pretty good.
Yeah, I think I'm a 6.5 too. But I'm more I'm optimistic.
You're on the positive 6.5.
Yeah, not the, the cynic side.
Cynical 6.5. Okay. So moving on to the rule book. So the rule book is 12 pages long. It's laid out pretty nicely. It's got a nice full cover on the front, and it's got designer notes on the back. Kind of talking about, I guess, the
notes,
the making of the game, or how they decided upon it. Have the design of it, which is kind of cool. You don't see that typically in a rule book.
And there's a pretty decent sized forward in there too, I think.
Yeah,
if I remember right. So talks about stuff.
A few things I didn't like is when you get into the first page, it's got the setup. It's got a nice full color thing showing where you place things. But there's absolutely no mention of the components until the very back. At the very end of it, they have a component list. Again, no pictures, just a list of components. And the other thing, this is just kind of a pet peeve. Some of them have numbers to tell you how many there are, and some of them spell out the word of the number. And it just seems like hodgepodge, arbitrary. It's a minor thing, but it's just an annoying thing because it says TWO 17-inch by 22-inch mounted leopards, SIX player chariot pieces in wood, and then 147 for card chariot being the number, 24 being the number for card skill deck. I mean, it's just, why did you go back and forth between the two? Again, pet peeve, minor thing. As far as the actual rules, one thing that we found that was really kind of a confusing thing, and we looked it up on Board Game Geek, and a lot of people are asking the same question, because there's a setup card that you get at the very beginning of the game. The only purpose that the card has is for you to pick it up and put your tokens in a set order for your skills on the game.
It kind of tells you what you're stronger and weaker in.
Because during the game you can level up, which we'll get to during gameplay. But they all start with 0 bonus for you, and it doesn't really indicate that there's, in the rules anyway, that you move them up. There's one example that actually mentioned or showed a token moving up on that track, going vertically up before it started going horizontally up. But it's totally implied that you actually have to move those up. So if you looked at it and read through the rules in their entirety like we did, and didn't see that. It was like, what's the significance of the order?
We easily overlooked that arrow pointing up. We didn't really connect the dots because it didn't clearly lay it out.
It never mentioned.
So,
it just has set them up.
Once we saw that on Board Game Geek, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it makes sense because basically you have 4 skills and you put them in an order from top to bottom, and it tells you in the book that you are more skilled in the one that's on top. But that doesn't really explain anything. Well, then if you look at the board, it actually has arrows, so the bottom one has to move up to the tiers before it ever start moving to the horizontal right.
Yeah.
But there's no explanation or real examples of that. There's one small example that shows one of the tokens moving 1 space, but there's no explanation as to why.
So I agree that part was quite confusing.
Yeah.
And it's significant
Yeah.
because your skills, as we'll talk about in gameplay, can make a big difference on how quickly you move on the track.
Right. So it's really a pretty basic racing game, and it looked more complex than it really is when you read through the rules, because all you're doing is matching icons, and the number of you at match gives you. But we'll get it again. We'll get the gameplay. All in all, it's a pretty simple game to learn. The book makes it a little more confusing, I think, than it should have been.
Yeah, but it's not terrible either.
Yeah, it's not terrible. I'll probably give this rulebook a 6.5. I think I'm sticking with my 6.5 trend. I don't think it's great. I don't think it's bad. It's just
I'm the one that purchased this. I looked through it a little bit, and so I do agree that part about the setup with your skills kind of sucks. But I like the art in it, and I like the history they went into it. So I'm going to go a little bit higher with the 7.
Yeah, because I do think this is unique on the back as far as design goes. You don't see that very often. So, all right, moving on to the gameplay. So this is there's a racetrack here, has a start and a finish. Oddly, they chose to put a finish that was a few spaces
further down
instead of just having this be the start and finish.
Yeah.
But that's fine. I mean, you go to a typical horse race and you're going to have the finish line get moved along. There's not always the same start and finish, so that doesn't really bother me. It just seems kind of an odd choice, but basically you're doing 3 laps around this track, and you get a hand of 8 cards to start the game, and you're always going to maintain a hand of 8 cards at the end of your play. So you'll draw back up to 8 at the end of your turn. So these cards have different icons on them in either yellow, green, red, or black.
And numbers ranging from 0 to 5.
And the pairing of the number and the icon is significant. So just because it's the same color or suit does not make it equivalent. They have to have the same value as well.
That's correct.
There's also some cards that have bonus icons on them that will give you abilities like to heal or to shield yourself from damage for the round. Different icons are available on the cards. And then there are some cards that had just a basic whip on them as well. But there's not a lot of those. So basically, you're going to have then 3 cards in the middle that represent the current crowd card, which is basically what is in. Yeah, it's a shared card that anyone can use.
But thematically, it's what the crowd's looking for. It's going to get them excited.
Yeah. I'm not sure exactly why, but
I mean, thematically, that's what I read in the book.
Okay. So. And then, so the other 2 cards are basically just telling you what's coming. So you can kind of plan
a little bit,
a little bit.
And I think that's where having the 8 cards was a good idea. Yeah. Because not only can you plan your turn this turn, but you can kind of plan ahead as well.
Right. Assuming you get good cards.
Right.
Which we'll get into. The other thing is you have an Emperor die. The Emperor basically gives a favor for a specific type of action during the round. So you roll that die, and it'll tell you the suit that he prefers for the round, or else it'll have a wild where basically any suit he doesn't really care. I'm not sure what thematically that is.
Or the damage die, where it's like he's throwing probably animal carcasses or something out there to
tin cans, whatever.
Beer bottles. Whatever.
Yeah, I'm assuming they had those in Roman times.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They
probably PBR.
Probably still have them at some of the groceries.
Either Bush or PBR, probably.
Yes.
So, because those have been around forever.
So, but it's basically a damage to everybody.
Yeah, to everybody.
Depending on the number of player count, how much damage it actually does. Which that's another thing I don't understand. There's damage done based on player count, and it seems completely arbitrary that they reduced it, except for the fact that you didn't have enough wood tokens, possibly. I don't understand why. So basically, you're going to, from your hand, play up to 3 cards each round. And you have to match the icons. If you have at least 3 icons of the same number and suit, you will be able to trigger them, and you'll get to move spaces based upon the number value of the color that you're playing and how many icons added together. So like if in this case there's 4 2s of green and here's a 5th 2. So I can actually play all 3 of those cards together and I will get 5 icons of 2. So that would be 7 movement from that. In addition, if there was a green on the card in the center,
you could use that.
I could use that one. So if this one were in play in the first spot where it's a 6/6/2 in green,
that would give me
a 6th 2, and I could move 6 spaces plus 2 for 8 movement. There's also a perk for having at least 6 of an icon, because if you do, you will get to draw a token from this bag.
And this is where you're currying favor. So it's like you got the crowd excited, and so they're rewarding you, and it could be any number of different perks.
You get some standard tokens to start the game. You basically get a +5 in every one of the colors, and you get one that lets you discard 3 cards from your hand to help if you
kind of do some card drawing.
To manage your hand if you got a really bad hand, which I had almost the entire game. So basically, you move your movement, and whoever is in first always is going to move first. On the first turn, there is no first player, so you're not limited by other players ahead of you.
That's only the first hand of cards.
Yes.
That's all that.
After that, turn order is established by who's furthest along the track, and if you're tied, whoever's on the inside. Right. So it's much like what you would see in a horse race. You're limited by people who are ahead of you. So when you move, you have to move an extra space to move onto the inside of the track.
Around them.
Right. So you're always wanting to pass on the left.
Yeah. It's true.
I don't know if they use turn signals or not, but yeah, you always want to get on that left lane. You gotta reach out and smack the person on your side. When you get to the corners, when you go around, they actually have extra spaces in there on the outside that you have to count, and unless you have played the black icon, which gives you basically skill in rounding and cornering. So that was a neat little feature.
I like that because, in real life, you'd have to slow down and go around a corner. So that takes that into effect.
Yeah. Then you have 2 suits that kind of deal with damage. You have ones that are red, where you actually inflict damage on other players. Where, based upon how many you play, if you play 3, you do 1 damage. If you play 4 or more, you do 2 damage to each other. Up to a maximum of a round of 3 damage is the most they can take from players' other actions. Yeah. So it isn't brutal because it's limited, but those pool, and every one of those is a negative movement in a future round unless you can get rid of them.
Which can really slow you down.
Yes. Now, they do have a feature to get rid of those, which is the yellow icon, which is the healing icon. And if you get to play that, you get to heal you round half of it up. Yeah. So if you had 7, you get to heal 4 and remove them before you get your limitation for your movement from them. So that's a nice way of countering that.
I think so too, but the balance of it is that generally the yellow doesn't have very high numbers.
Yeah.
So you're not moving as much, but you get to heal, which does help you move because you're getting rid of those negative
The green is what's specialized in movement.
Yeah, that's
it's got the highest number. It's sprinting, but there's no bonus effect for it.
Right.
So, that's the counter, but the green is your only ideal in the straightaways, because once you hit the rounding, you're going to have to go double the spaces if you use the green over there. So you've got to kind of time it well. The problem is you've got to manage your hand in such a way you have those cards when you hit those spaces, and that did not work out well for me at all during the course of the game. First, I started out way in the lead at the very beginning.
He was way in the lead.
And then my cards just completely went to garbage. Now, you do have the option to basically discard 1 to 3 cards and skip your turn, if you will. And if so, you heal all of your damage you've taken.
Right. And then you would draw back up to 8.
And then you draw back up to 8 at the end of your turn.
Did anyone do that?
No, because I never really had a need to.
I didn't either.
My damage never got out of control.
I was built up to 7 damage, but even then I was getting good enough cards, and my bonuses were compensating for it, where I didn't feel like I needed to do it.
Yeah, I never really had a lot of damage the whole time. I mean, Dwight had like none. You had
Miranda kept hers down to none almost the whole game. I built up to quite a bit. Dwight was kind of fluctuating back and forth. But you and Miranda stayed pretty low most of the game.
Yeah, so, they didn't impact us, but, you had it, and it didn't really slow you down. You were clearly the leader for most of the game. So I didn't feel like the damage did a whole lot during the game. It was mostly, to me, just it was almost like a fun thing to have, to feel like you were sticking it to the person who was at the front. But apart from that, it really didn't have much feel. Now, the other thing that happens is each time you play, and I did like this, is you can basically level up an ability by playing that action over and over throughout the game. So each time you do, you get to move up tracks.
on a skill
on
track.
the skill track. But again, it starts on the beginning. Everybody gets zero benefit, and you have to move those tokens up to the top before they go horizontal, at which point you'll get +1 until they get all the way to the far right side, at which point they lock in at the lowest level of bonus, which is
+3 at the very bottom.
But it can go all the way up to +9.
Yeah. And then also the king's favor die or emperor's favor die can help in that regard too, because if you play the right color that the emperor's looking for, you get an additional movement on that track.
Yeah. And there's some tokens that get you move up an additional one. So you can move up to max.
Yeah, I did one time. I got 3.
I got 3 as well one time. But again, you have to have the right cards to go with what the king is looking for during that round. So, or the emperor. So you just have to luck of the cards. And that's what was my biggest frustration of this game, is I didn't have the luck of the cards at all for most of the game. Even when I tried to manage my hand, I just never got good cards to go with it. I was lucky to get 3 icons to match during the course of the game, and with 8 cards, you would expect to have that at least. And I did get a lot of tokens, so I either had like almost nothing, or I got 6 or 7 at once, but usually they were not in green, which is where you get the real movement. I got 6 zeros, like yay! I get to move 0 spaces +6 for 6 movement.
I lucked out in that regard because I was able to manage my hand pretty well. So I had the cornering when I needed the cornering, I had the straightaways when I needed the straightaways for most of the game. But it would have been nice if there was better ways to manage. So like if you had a really crappy hand, or maybe another icon that would allow you to draw above and then at the end of the round have to discard down.
Yeah.
Something to allow you to be able to draw and discard a little bit more often. Yeah. Might have been pretty nice.
So I like the fact that this is an easy to teach, easy to get to the table racing game, but it's because of that, you're basically taking out a lot of the things that are features in a lot of the other racing games. So like the acceleration, deceleration, there's none of that in this game. It's whatever you play, that's how much you move. There's no planning ahead for a turn unless you just are planning which cards you're going to get. But, when you draw, if you don't get any curved cards, it's not going to matter. And I kept getting curved cards, but they would be like 2 zeros, 2 2s, and 2 1s. And what am I going to do? I can't make 3 out of those no matter how hard to try. So I kept getting into a bind on those curves because, I couldn't get the right cards when the time was appropriate. The other thing I didn't like about it is the tokens. The bonus tokens, you have some healing ones, you have some ones that are whips, which I do like the fact that the whips, you basically get +5 movement, but it's kind of a catch-up mechanism. Because
as soon as you catch up to a horse, you have to stop.
You can't use it to move past a horse, and if you're in the lead, you can't use it.
Yeah, I wasn't able to use a whip.
So, but the thing is the whips are color locked. And so I had a green whip and never could get green cards. Or if I got it, I'd have another bonus that was more beneficial to play. And you can only play one of those tokens per hand. So I had a green healing and a green whip at the end of the game.
You could play your discard card token and a modifier token.
Yeah, basically it's because you have 2 piles. One is your discards and one is your hand that you're actually playing.
But mostly, you're right. You can only play 1 modifier.
So I got stuck with these green modifier tokens, but I never got green cards. So it didn't do me any good. And that was a very frustrating thing because that was the only way I was going to catch up. I was so far behind and I couldn't use them at all because there was no way for me to do it. I did max out my red, green, and yellow, but who cares because you can't get those cards. I mean, I had red and yellow, but there was almost no movement on them. So I just was behind the whole game and had no way of catching up, I felt like. And it felt like the last. And I think Miranda mentioned that it's 3 laps, but the order was already determined by lap 2. So the last lap was completely superfluous. I think it's useful for leveling up to the maximums, which is nice. But if the order is not going to change, what's the point? And it may have just been this playthrough, but either way, it didn't feel like there was it felt like that it was a little bit long-winded for what you got out of it at the end. And if there was maybe 6 players, I think this might be more interactive where you have more changing of the guard of who's in the lead.
Yeah, possibly. But I didn't feel that it's like any dice game. I mean, there's a lot of luck involved. So you got to go into it accepting that there's a lot of luck involved.
Yeah.
And so as long as you do that, I don't think it's a negative. I think if I were to pick a negative, it's the lack of being able to manage your hand. I wish you had more ways of being able to do that.
Yeah.
Than anything.
Yeah, I think you can skip your turn, we said, and draw basically.
But it's only the 3 cards.
But then you're basically way behind already.
Yeah, because you skipped a turn.
So you're skipping a turn. You're gonna get further behind. Yes, you'll get rid of all your damage, but damage was really never my problem.
Right.
So all in all, as far as racing games goes, this one doesn't offer a lot of the features I like to see in racing games. I'm really looking forward. I backed Mega Pulse. It was a Kickstarter. It's running into some hiccups as far as releasing it, but it's basically, from what I've seen, it was Mario Kart on steroids, but it looks like a Tron almost.
Yeah.
I'm super excited about that one, or Wipeout maybe from the video games. That one has me excited because there's more to it. The racing games, I know, like Flamme Rouge is a real popular one, or Formula Day.
Formula D, there's Downforce is a newer one by Capital.
Yeah. But again, those are ones where you have more acceleration,
yeah.
deceleration management, which this one doesn't offer. But I think there's more to those games, but then they're harder to teach.
Right. And for your negative, to me, is a positive because, one, I really don't own a racing game. This is my first one I bought.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's going to be really good to take to my local shop to teach people because it isn't hard to teach and it's easy to pick up. And so for that reason, it's a good intro game. So I get where you're coming from, and if I was going to be playing with a bunch of more, veteran players that really want more strategy, no, I probably wouldn't pull this out. But like I said, teaching at a shop, which is what I do more often than not, this is going to be perfect.
Well, I think the odd thing to me, I think, is the marketing of this, because you see GMT on the label.
Yeah.
Immediately, the first thing that comes to mind, if you're
thinking of a hardcore war game.
Hardcore war game.
Yeah.
There's nothing on this. The box, the art of it would not indicate that this is an entry to light to medium at the max, but probably on the light side.
Oh, for sure.
Game.
For sure.
And then you get the rule book out, and you read through this, and you also, unless you read between the lines, are not going to get the fact that this is a very light racing game. Yeah, you might pick it up along the way, but when there's rules that are missing and confusing, some of the stuff in it, it's not a horrible rule book, as I mentioned, but it's strangely set in the order of it, and it's missing a few things that we ended up having to look up online. Yeah. So there's just the gaps in the rule book and the marketing of the box. This is not something I would think is going to sell.
But it's a beautiful box.
The art's pretty.
I love the box. It's really cool.
It's just, this doesn't strike me as looking like an entry-level game. And for it to be that, when you get this out, you're expecting, okay, there's going to be some complexities in the maneuvering. There's no complexity in this whatsoever.
Right.
So it wasn't what I thought it was going to be getting it out of the box. And, I'm glad it actually is good for you for what you were trying to look for. So I think it is a good fit for you. It's not one I would pick up.
Right.
So as far as my rating on the game overall, I'm probably going to stick with my 6.5. I think there's some nice features to it. Very, very underdeveloped, in my opinion, as far as those features. That it doesn't feel like you get a lot out of them. You do have some, track movement, which I like. Obviously, a track movement, you go around a track, but I'm talking about the skill tracks.
And I like the fact that when you pass someone, you have to pass someone on the inside, so you have to use that extra step to be able to get past somebody. So I thought that was pretty nice as well.
The same way.
Yeah. So I like that part. So you said 6.5. I think I'm going to go a little bit higher because what I wanted it for meets that expectation. So I'm going to go 7.5. I think it's a good intro game. It's solid for what it is. And so, I'm 7.5.
So, if you're looking for a lighter racing game, it's not going to look like it on the box, but it is a lighter game.
Yeah.
So,
and it was fun. I mean, I had fun with it. So
it's not hard to pick up. It was easy to learn in a quick, short night, so I didn't have any complaints about that. Just not my cup of tea.
There you go.
All right. Well, that's what our thoughts are on Charioteer.
Let us know what you think.
Yeah. Let us know if you've tried it, what you think. If not, if this is something you're interested in, let us know that too.
Yeah,
We'd love to hear it. All right. Till next time.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.